Hi everyone, I'm State Senator Lydia Edwards. I live in East Boston, have the honor to represent Winthrop, Revere, and other parts of Boston. And I just wanted to give a quick update on the work that I'm doing, address some of the questions I'm getting right now, and then also give some insight into what I hopefully will be a road to peace and solutions as we go forward. So update very quickly on what we're doing now. As you know, I'm the state senator and we're in the tail end of our legislative session. It's April and our session technically ends around July 31st. So we have budgets coming up. We also have a lot of major legislation that's coming up, including the housing bond bill, which is worth $4.1 billion, and that's to support a massive infrastructure and building around the state, as well as also making sure that what we build is truly affordable and also upkeeping and maintaining a lot of our already free public housing. So the goal is really to support us as we grow. That's the bond bill. The other major piece of legislation that's going to be pushing through is the economic bond bill, economic development. And that is going to be a massive amount of, again, money infusion to push for our economy, our local businesses, our small businesses, to help them grow as well. And I will happily give detailed reports on both of those legislations as they move along. But for right now, the bond bill is, the housing bond bill is in the State Assets and Bonding Committee. And when that gets released, it'll go to the House, and then from the House to the Senate, and then I will give you reports. So. I know many people have heard about the MBTA Communities Law. A lot of people have reached out to me, and I have heard from many people, former legislators, including our former senators, and also I've reached out and heard from, or people from local government have reached out in all aspects of my district, but especially in Winthrop. And so before I go into thoughts and just kind of some FAQs and some hopefully suggestions for how we get through this moment, I do want to give a huge grateful thank you to our local legislators. The members of the Town Council of Winthrop have done an immense amount of work and research in this moment and outreach and having individual meetings in the districts within Winthrop. And I am so grateful for their leadership and this time and being dedicated to research, to communication, and to creating community in this process. So the MBTA Communities Law has been around, or became law in January of 2021. While I was not in office at the time, I was keenly aware of it as a Boston City Councilor, and I remember we were advocating for that law that essentially does two things. It assures that cities and towns that are within MBTA communities or have MBTA stops near them or surround them or are adjacent to them have at least one zone for multifamily housing. So that's the first thing it does. And the second thing it does is it lowers the threshold so that when a plan or zoning proposal comes up in front of the local government to allow for that zoning reform, it is no longer 2/3 majority required, it's only a simple majority. So the MBTA Communities Law is about planning, and it is about allowing multifamilies and density around the state. 177 communities have to, in some way, shape, or form, comply with this law. So that's a little bit of the background. Is the compliance mandatory? Yes. It's the law, and it is essentially when the State House does pass laws that are optional for localities, that language is put in the state law. There was no option or no opt-out provision in this law. There are, I'm sure, some consequences if there is non-compliance. In some cases, there's some funding that could be denied to the city or town. And in some cases, such as Milton, the Attorney General will file suit to enforce the law. Essentially, it is, I think, better to comply and negotiate and assure that Winthrop has a voice in this process rather than simply say no. I think the no is not a form of leadership. It's not a form of creativity, and I don't know that it really necessarily builds the community that we need. So again, 177 communities have to comply, 84 that actual host MBT service, and 93 that abut or are adjacent to the MBTA. So we are part of a statewide effort to get additional housing units around the entire state, based off of recent reports from the Secretary of the Housing and Livable Communities, Secretary Ed Augustus. The state of Massachusetts is short 220,000 units for housing. And that impacts us in many ways. One is the amount of choice that people actually have to stay in the communities that they want to. The dignity of having choice has a lot to do with whether there's options for them. Then there's the other component of whether those options are truly affordable. Remember earlier I said, as a city councilor, I'd advocated for the MBTA laws, but I specifically was fighting to make sure that when we were changing any form of zoning, that it included affordable housing. It did not. And I still hope for, and I'm pushing for, affordable housing to be part of our statewide assessment of zoning. And you'll see in the next, or in a future in a future broadcast or in a future talk I have about the housing bond bill, there's actually a component of the bond bill that lowers the threshold for zoning for affordable housing from 2/3 to simple majority. And I'm excited about that. But we'll talk about that another time. Back to the MBTA communities and Winthrop. So here we are in Winthrop. We have, I think, an opportunity to plan, to vision, and to see our community grow in a guided, responsible way. And if you're in opposition to any form of growth, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. But I think when change or laws or challenges come, and they always will in different forms, I think it's incumbent upon local leaders, state leaders, to meet those challenges head on and set a table where every voice feels welcome. Speaking of which, I will be reaching out to individuals to set up small group conversations throughout Winthrop, and with some counselors or separately on my own, I will be meeting with many people to talk about the MBTA Communities Law personally. But back to, again, Winthrop and the MBTA Communities Act. We have this moment, and we have been considered a community adjacent, and we are required to submit plans by the end of the year to the secretary. And I think it's really important that instead of saying no, we ask the secretary and the Healy administration to see us for everything that we are and everything we've already done. In many cases, if you look at all of the projects and plans that we have passed and vetted through the community, we have well over 600, possibly close to 700 units already being built, being put throughout our community. And so the question is, do we really need to do anything more? We have been growing at a responsible rate already. And we've been growing in a footprint that's ever shrinking. And the secretary needs to understand that. I believe my job is to advocate for Winthrop to be seen in all of its efforts and acknowledged for all of its efforts, so that there isn't just a cookie cutter demand on us and treatment like we're any other town. There are some towns that have not done their part. There are some towns that are going to fight and try to stop building even one unit. Winthrop isn't that town. Winthrop has been doing its part. And I believe when we present to the Secretary the uniqueness of the topography of Winthrop, I said it's ever shrinking due to climate change. The fact that we're actually more dense than their initial numbers called for, where they said that we were 1.9 square miles, when we're really 1.6. When you look at what we abut a natural resource for the region of Belle Isle Marsh, when you think about the fact that we have limited means of ingress and egress in and out of our town, when you look at our population of students, when you look at all of those different things, Winthrop is doing our part. So to me, leadership in this moment is setting a table with the Secretary, Town Council, representative, where we talk about what Winthrop is doing already and we get the state to support us. I don't believe that we should be reacting with a no. No conversation, no planning, no vision. That's not my leadership style, and I don't believe that's what we ask of our elected officials. I respect that people do not trust this law. I respect that people do not want this law to be implemented. And I'm happy to listen and to understand why, but I want to be very clear. We need to be saying yes to conversations, yes to communications, and yes to negotiation. I think ultimately the spirit of Winthrop is one of collaboration, creativity, and being able to meet challenges head on. I want to acknowledge, for example, what happened here in Winthrop with the fire. This community came together to meet that challenge head on, to support our neighbors, help them find housing, and the state helped the town of Winthrop with $100,000 to set up a fire fund. That's how I see this moment as well. We have a challenge. We should come together, and your representative and your senator will be fighting for the state to do its part too. I am deeply saddened, honestly, by what I think is the vitriol, the nastiness, some name calling that some people have devolved into, where we prefer to talk at each other than to each other, with each other, because I know that Winthrop is stronger than that. I don't believe this process is going to break us. I think ultimately it's going to not just build us as a town, but it's also helping to build bridges if done right. Now, I can't speak to the rollout, the advertising, or whether people feel that this is a surprise and they feel like they weren't given enough advance notice. I don't see the point in speaking to things that happened before I was here. I can speak to what I can do now, and that's to listen, to set a table, a respectful table, where I believe we'll navigate this moment. I truly believe that while the total number of units that has been assigned to Winthrop is well over 800, I ultimately don't believe in any way, shape, or form that that's how many units we're going to end up having to plan for or to build. I actually believe that we are already on our way naturally in the way we've been growing that could result in far less, if any, increases. I cannot promise those things, but I can assure you that's the headspace, the heart space that I'm bringing to the table with the secretary. We are meeting with the secretary. We are talking with him. That's what you, I believe, elected us to do, to fight for Winthrop, to make sure that Winthrop, beautiful town that it is, for families, the beautiful small town where people know their neighbors and rally together, stays that way. So again, I will be calling you back. I've been calling you back and emailing you back and setting up those smaller conversations. I'm happy to meet you where you are with a cup of coffee, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.